What's up, programmer? In this video, I'm going to explain the data types and variables that are available in C++. So, what are variables? Variables in C++ are data types that store a value. There are a few different types of variables, and each can store a different type of value. You can store numbers, letters, words, or even true or false values in variables. You can even store a whole paragraph in a variable if you wanted to. Now, there are 5 main distinctive types of variables that you need to know. The first one is integers. They store only whole numbers, not numbers with decimals or fractions. The second one is float. They can store whole numbers, as well as decimals or fraction numbers. The third one is string. They can store multiple letters or characters, which means they can store multiple words. The fourth one is characters. They can only store one letter or character. The fifth one is booleans. They can only store true or false values. Now that you know the 5 main different types of variables, you can now create your first variable. To create a variable in C++, all you have to do first is think of the variable type that you want. For example, if you want to store whole numbers, you should use integers. If you want to store more than one letter, use strings. For integers, you will type it as int. For floats, you will type it as float. For characters, you will type it as char. For strings, you will type it as string. For booleans, you will type it as bool. Then, the next thing you want to do is write a name for your variable type. In this case, I typed a few variables out with one named as x and the other two named as y and z, such as like the most common variables used in algebra. Now, you then place an equal sign after the name of the variable and then type the value that you want. For my x variable, I have it set to 10. For my y variable, I have it set to 99.9. For my z variable, I have it set to 0.0. Make sure that you always put a semicolon after you typed in the value that you want. This is a very common mistake, even among experienced programmers, that we sometimes forget to type the semicolon afterwards, so make sure that you always type the semicolon after a value. Now that you have a few variables set up, you will want to print them out to see their values. To do this, type cout, then type 2 less than signs, and then type the name of the variable. Again, make sure you type the semicolon in the end. Now we will run the program and see. There we go. Although the result is closely together, we can separate each value of each variable by typing NL after the variable name in the output line. This will print each value in a new separate line of its own. Now, with the basics down, let's create a couple more variables. For these variables, I am going to create all of them based around a computer. So for example, if I wanted to create a name for my computer, I would type string, then name, and then I will name it as personal PC. As a side note, there are a couple of variable names that you cannot use, such as true, new, and many more. I will have a link in the description that you can use to check out what the keywords are. Usually, you want to name your variables to be more specific, but this is something to keep in mind if you write a keyword as a name for your variable. Then for a character, I would type char, power as the name, and then set it to I, which basically means the switch for the power for the PC is on. Also, make sure that for strings and characters, it's very important that you have double quotations around the value for strings and single quotations for characters, otherwise it will cause errors. You do not need to have double quotations or single quotations for integers, floats, or booleans, only for strings and characters. Then for an integer, I would type int, then I would type monitor as the name, and for this computer as an example, I would say it only has one monitor right now. For a float, I would type float, then I would type cost as the name, and then I would maybe say this computer costed around $799.99. For a boolean, I would type bool, then I would type has power, which I would set it to true, because in this example, the PC has power and is on. So now we created our 5 variables describing our PC, and we can now print and display these values about the PC. So I would do the same thing as I did before, type cout, then type 2 less than signs, otherwise known as the insertion operator. Then type the name of the variable, and then type NL so that each output is separated and on its own line. Now, if you notice, the boolean value displays 1, which is completely fine, because 1 equals to true and 0 equals to false. This is just C++ way of showing true or false. Now, if we wanted to display the variables along with some text and description next to it that describes the variable data values, we can just type the text that we want, then we will make sure that we type the double quotations, not single quotations, around the text. Add a space if you want so that there's a space between the text and the variable value. Make sure you add the insertion operator as well. Then we will run this program again. As you can see, it now displays the additional text and code that we wrote. Now, I am going to show you how to update the variables. Let's say for example that later on as you write code in your program that you want to update some of your variables. To do this, all we have to do is write the name of the variable we want to update. For example, in this case, I will update the cost variable. Let's say that maybe I got this computer for a discount and instead of paying $799.99, I got it for $599.99. Then I just have to set it equal to something else. In this case, I will set it equal to $599.99. Remember, the value that you set it equal to must be a value of the variable type. You can, for example, update a boolean variable to store an integer value. So when we run the program again, we should see the updated values of the variables. Another thing I want to mention is that for each specific variable, you only need to declare that variable once. This is why when I updated the variables, I did not need to write the variable type again in front of the variable name. Also, you generally want each variable that you create to have a different and unique name, and to not use the same name for other variables, as this will cause confusion and issues later on. You can also create variables without setting a value to the variable. All you have to do in this case is type the variable type, then type the name of the variable and then a semicolon. Later on, when you are writing out code in your program and you want to use that variable again, you can just set a value to the variable like before with just using the variable name and setting it to a value that you want. This is an overview of the different data types and variables in C++. Comment down below if you found this video helpful or you have any questions you want to ask. Anyways, this is Easy Syntax, showing you programming made easy. Thank you for watching.